Hey everyone, my name is Perry, and welcome back to the Cassette Phase. So I hope you're all having a good week so far. I don't usually check in midweek with a video, but I really wanted to hop on for just a few minutes today to talk about some nostalgia. And this time, we're talking about nostalgia, but in the form of music. And our first ever album review here on the Cassette Phase. Because for me, music, certain songs or certain albums can just transport you back to a very specific place and time. Plus, with today's video, we're going to continue on with our summer-themed content because the album that we're going to talk about today is honestly one of the best summertime albums that I've ever heard. And I've listened to a lot of music, some good, some bad, some awesome, and this one is definitely awesome. And we can't forget about our cassette of the day, so we'll do that too. And just kind of relax here in the den today and talk about a very unique and specific kind of nostalgia. Sound like fun to you? Come hang out. Okay everyone, welcome back to the Ottoman, and welcome back to another great day here in the den. We've got some DuckTales going over on the smart TV. It's not the CRT anymore, but that's alright. We're making do. I'll eventually get a replacement, like I mentioned before, but we're good for now. And we're going to talk about our cassette of the day before we dive into our album review. So this is for a movie. A VHS tape for, this was one of those movies that I feel like we all saw as kids in the 80s, but it wasn't necessarily one that our parents wanted us seeing, This was always kind of one of those ones where it was like, okay, I'm over at a friend's house for a sleepover, and the older brother pulls out this tape and says, oh, we're going to watch this tonight. This is from 1982, starring Sylvester Stallone. Of course, we've got First Blood. The first entry in the Rambo series. And I just watched this again recently, and I hadn't seen it in years. And I was kind of picking up on, I guess what I had forgotten about was that this was a little bit more like serious in tone than some of the sequels, which were more like your standard action blockbusters in a way, if that makes sense. I feel like this one touched on some more serious themes, mistreatment of veterans and PTSD even, and some of that type of stuff. But, set the stage for one of the best action franchises. And a movie that wasn't necessarily for kids, but like I said, kids saw it. And then, of course, they did a toy line and a Saturday morning cartoon based on all of this, which is crazy, but that's kind of what they did back then, We had toys and cartoons based on RoboCop, too, and that was a pretty violent film in places, but... not something that I watch a ton, like I said, once every few years. And I still prefer, if we're talking about Stallone franchises, I still prefer Rocky. But this one is also awesome, and I just feel like very 80s. Coming out, the movies like coming out of the Vietnam War and Rambo and everything that he's dealing with. I feel like those types of things were kind of, big common themes in the 80s. And this movie definitely capitalized on that. Pretty cool looking tape too. That cover art is pretty awesome. "96 minutes, just about the perfect length for a film like this, right? Anyone else a fan of the Rambo series? And if so, which one's your favorite? But I figured it was a good day to talk about old First Blood on our cassette of the day. So, before we dive into the album review, I want to take just a few minutes to talk about nostalgia. And for those of you who have watched some of my walk and talk videos from the past, where I literally just walk around my neighborhood and ramble on about whatever's on my mind that day, you all have heard some of this before. But I oftentimes find myself looking for new ways to experience nostalgia, if that makes sense. It's kind of like a paradox, or is it an oxymoron? Either way, I'm constantly seeking out ways to scratch that nostalgic itch. feed that nostalgia bug that so many of us enjoy? Well, one way that I've done that over the years is by exploring movies and music and books and TV shows from the 80s and the early 90s, but ones that I didn't actually experience myself as a kid back then. Now, we all know that revisiting the actual things that you experienced as a kid is probably the best and easiest way to access those feelings of nostalgia. But what happens when you've done all of that? Does it kind of wear off in a way? Do you take a certain book or a certain movie and set it aside for a few years and then revisit it later? I've done that a few times. But hearing albums and watching movies that you missed out on as a kid can still drop you into that very specific place and time, just in a different way. Maybe you pick up on certain production cues or instrument choices within music. A guitar solo or a saxophone solo or the sound of a type of synthesizer. Those things can still make me feel nostalgic, even though I've never heard that particular song before in my life. So I've gone through the back catalogs of so many different artists and bands from back in those days, from the megastars to even some of the lesser known ones. And it's been great. I have found so many songs that will probably stick with me for the rest of my life that I'd never heard before. But even that well can eventually run dry, right? There aren't that many groups that are still around, still making that type of music and releasing new albums. There are a few, but not many. And this is kind of why a few years ago I started down the synthwave rabbit hole. Outrun and vaporwave and retrowave music. Music that is modern, but is meant to evoke feelings that we experienced back in the 80s, just in a kind of synthetic way. And this was kind of like a revelation in a way. It made me discover that I could still access some of the best, most nostalgic feelings by listening to music that was made this century or even this decade. And sometimes the synthwave song might hit you in the feels even more so than the Bon Jovi tune or the Paula Abdul track. And within synthwave, there are so many different little subgenres, including some where the artists incorporate in, live instruments, like I mentioned, saxophone solo or electric guitar. Well, today's album is going to feature a lot of the latter. Some amazing electric guitar shredding placed over some great vocals and catchy melodies and some of the best musical summer vibes available anywhere. So, if I've earned your trust at all, if you've allowed me to facilitate some nostalgic round trips for you, or if you've ever had a memory unlocked here on the Cassette Phase, I'm asking you to stick with me. So let's embark on a nostalgic journey through Ultraboss's 2022 album, Yachtmaster, a shimmering synthwave odyssey that captures the essence of summer nights, youthful romance, and the bittersweet beauty of fleeting moments. Each track here is a sonic postcard, inviting you to relive sun-soaked memories and the magic of endless horizons. So Ultraboss is an artist that is fairly new to me. I just really discovered this within the past year or so. And I highly recommend it for fans of things like Richard Marx, 80s era Genesis and Phil Collins, maybe like some Mike and the Mechanics, or even like a little bit of Steve Winwood mixed in. And at times it can remind you of bands like Toto or 80s Foreigner. And if you weren't aware that this was a modern album, right, 2022, you could easily believe that this thing came out in 1986. And I just recently reached out to one of my favorite graphic artists over on Instagram. I think it's pronounced Dashlekti, I think. I'm going to put his information in the description because I asked him, can I use some of your art in one of my upcoming YouTube videos? And he said, yes, of course, absolutely, go ahead. Super nice guy. But I want to do that here because some of these images look like what this album sounds like, if that makes sense. If you're a visual person, take a look at some of these and you will instantly recognize the feeling that I'm talking about with this album. Aren't those amazing? I use this stuff for phone wallpapers and laptop wallpapers all the time. So good. Now, I want to go through this album track by track, but they'll be brief, and we'll keep it moving quickly along. And then I'll share with you my overall thoughts and my score at the end, and also tell you how you can listen to it. So the album starts off with a song called Where the People Dance. And this is like the perfect opener. Make sure your volume is cranked up because just the very first few seconds of it, you kind of know what you're gonna get. It sounds like the perfect kickoff to a Friday afternoon. You know, the weekend is here. Or maybe you're starting off on a really fun, long, epic road trip, something along those lines. But if you're going to just kind of sample this album and not listen to it all the way through, which I understand, you know, it's 51 minutes long and not everybody has the time to go listen to something like this all the way through. I'm going to give you a few key select tracks to just kind of sample if you want to go that route, and this is definitely one of those. The opener, you really can't skip it. It kind of sets the tone for the whole vibe and the whole feel of Yachtmaster. Okay, so track 2 is a song called When It's Love. This is a cool song, but I'll be honest, it's not my favorite on the album. You know, it kind of just blends into the overall soundscape. It sounds good within the flow of the whole thing, but on its own, it's not the most standout track. It definitely gets overshadowed by some of the other moments here, but that's to be expected. It's not a bad song by any means. It's just, you know, there are better ones, which we'll talk about. And that was the case a lot of the time with the cassettes and the albums that we listened to back in the 80s. You know, there'd be a few select standout tracks, and then the ones in between could sometimes be considered filler. And while I'm not going to say that this song is filler, it just blends in a little bit. It doesn't quite stand out. Still a really good song, though. Now, track 3, on the other hand, Talking to the Wind. This is a standout. It sounds like a song that you would hear right out of an 80s teen movie. You know, almost like something that you'd hear like Patrick Swayze singing over the end credits of a John Hughes film, or maybe being sung over a montage in an 80s teen comedy. It just has that feel. Great melody, really does sound like something that you could trick your mind and think, wow, that came out in 1988 and I heard it on the radio. Yeah, just really, really good. The vocals are good, the melodies are good. Talking to the Wind, good song. So track 4 is a song called Visions of Never. And this is an instrumental, still a really cool song. It's more of your traditional synthwave, retrowave, vaporwave, outrun style track. You know, no vocals or anything like that, but still some cool melodies and a really great feel. This one would sound really good driving down like a coastal highway with the sun shining. All right, so we're on track 5, which is called Night Cry. And this is another one that, if you hadn't told me otherwise, I would have assumed this was just a song from the radio in 1988 that I had never heard. I just missed it all these years. It does. It sounds like a Richard Marx hit. You know, real catchy, good melodies all throughout, good feel, just a smooth. You know, the instrumentals are smooth and it sounds really slickly produced, which a lot of this does. But it fits within the vibe that he was going for in this particular era that he's paying homage to. So, yeah, Night Cry, not the best song on the album, but it's definitely not skippable. Fits right in. I guess if this were a cassette, it would probably be the second to last track on side A, Night Cry. So for track 6, we've got The Flow of My Tears. And this is like your traditional classic 80s pop ballad. It's got like those really cool sounding keyboards all throughout, really good melody. The hook on this one kind of sticks in your head. So, if you're driving around running errands and you leave off at track 6, The Flow of My Tears is going to stick with you until you get back in the car and listen to the next song. But yeah, a ballad like this, again, radio friendly, sounds great. Phil Collins could have recorded it and we wouldn't have known the difference. Perfect closer. If I'm imagining this like a cassette, so track 6 would be the closer to side A or side 1, at least how I'm seeing it in my nostalgic brain. Yeah, really, really good song. One of the highlights, I think. One of the standouts for sure. Moving along to track 7, a song called No Stranger to the Rain. And this is one that when I heard it the first time, I was like, that's probably my least favorite on the album. The first time I listened to Yachtmaster all the way through and I looked back at the track listing, I think this might have been my least favorite. And that's okay, because not every song is going to be amazing. Some albums that works out that way, but not a lot. And it's not a bad song by any means. It does blend in with the rest of the album. It just has kind of a unique melody that didn't quite land for me. Maybe this will be one that grows on me after I've heard it, several more times. It's not jarring. It doesn't make you want to immediately skip. It goes well within the flow of the album. It's just not my favorite, but good song nonetheless. Now for track 8, we do have a really catchy song here. A nice upbeat pop rock song. And this one was a little bit of a grower. The first time I listened to this, I was like, oh man, we got a little weak spot. We got a little valley with tracks 7 and 8. But the more I listened to Messed Up, the more it's grown on me. And now I think about that chorus as one of the catchiest on the whole album. Kind of unique. It has some really cool melodic choices and goes to some notes that you wouldn't really anticipate, but it works. And just a really, really great driving rhythm. So definitely a good bounce back from track 7 and leading up into one of the best songs on the whole album that we'll talk about with track 9. And speaking of track 9, it's called Prisoner of the Night. And it sounds kind of ominous or dark, but it is not. It is one of the most upbeat, catchiest songs that you'll hear, honestly. I told you guys, I've listened to a lot of music. I'm not bragging, I just do. I think that life is better with music playing, so I'm constantly listening to stuff. And this is a standout track for sure. Like I mentioned at the beginning, if you're gonna just sample this album and pick a few songs to kind of get a feel for it before you decide to commit to listening to the whole thing, this is one of them. You gotta go with the opener, Where the People Dance, and then you gotta go with Prisoner of the Night. And there's one more that I'm gonna tell you about that you have to at least give a chance to. But this is upbeat, catchy, rockin', feels good. I guarantee you, if you've got your sunglasses on and you're cruising, you will be drumming on the steering wheel by the end of this song. I can almost guarantee it. So this is a must listen. I think if someone was gonna ask me, I don't have time, I'm only gonna listen to one song, this would be in contention for that one song. It's just that good. So we've made it to track 10, which is called More Than Ever Tonight. This is a really good one. Definitely one that you don't want to skip. Now, it does follow Prisoner of the Night, so there's automatically going to be just a slight dip, and I mean slight. This is another one that sounds like it could have came out of an 80s teen movie, or any kind of 80s movie, any drama or comedy. It just has that great feel to it, youthfulness and bittersweet feelings. It's all there on this one. So not one of the standouts, but definitely solid, and I enjoy it every time I hear it. All right, track 11, we're almost to the end. This one is called Master of Disguise. Now this was another one that the first time I listened to this album, I was like, I could take or leave that song. I'm not jumping up to add it to a playlist or anything like that, but it does fit well within the flow of the album. It's not quite as good as the track before it, and it's definitely not as good as the track that comes after it, which we'll talk about. But it's still solid, and on its own, if you heard that by itself, you'd be like, oh wow, that was really cool. It just doesn't quite live up to the greatness of some of the high points on this album, but it does fit well within the whole thing. Definitely not one that you want to skip, but it's not my favorite. Good song nonetheless. And for the closer, you know it has to be good, you know it has to be epic if it's going to be the closer here. And we've got the amazing song Wall of Dreams. Now this, I don't want to overhype it, so I'm going to try to reel myself back in a little bit here. But this is one of those songs that I'm going to be listening to for the rest of my life, honestly. It just, it starts off a little bit slow. It is a ballad. I guess you could say it's like a power ballad. But man, once you get to that chorus, it's like a soaring, super catchy hook and chorus that you hear a few times throughout the song. The instrumentation is awesome, and it sounds very authentic. Like, it sounds like Bruce Hornsby with Phil Collins and some of the other guys I've talked about, Steve Winwood. Any of those guys could have recorded this song in 1987 and it would have been a huge hit, guaranteed. The melody might be kind of reminiscent of some things that you've heard before, as is the case with a lot of these songs, but it's unique enough that it stands on its own. And I don't want to spoil anything, but there is a saxophone solo here that once it kicks in, like, it honestly gives me goosebumps every time. No exaggeration. It's so good. When that hits and that kicks in, you know you've got something special. You just do. My only gripe, and this is a small complaint, I wish the song was just a little bit longer. I think it's like 4.5 minutes, so it's fine. But after you come out of that epic saxophone solo and it brings that amazing chorus back in, it pretty quickly starts to fade after that. I wish he would have given us like 2 or 3 more refrains of that chorus and just let it ride. Let it be a 6-minute anthem, because that's what it feels like. It feels like it could be that. And just what an amazing closer. This album was something that I was like, okay, this is really cool. I'm going to listen to this a lot. But once I got to the Wall of Dreams and heard that, I was like, okay, this is an album that I need to set aside some time to talk about on my YouTube channel. And I know not everyone's going to watch it because not everybody cares about music, and that's fine. But I hope that some of you guys have stuck around with me for this, because if nothing else, this track is worth it. So again, if you're going to do the sample platter, track 1, track 9, and then the closer. If you do nothing else, and then go back and fill in the gaps afterwards. But just a fantastic song, like almost like considered for a song to ever be played at your funeral. Is that going too far? Is that too dark? I don't know. It's just something that I thought of. I'm like, this would be a really like when my time has come, I could just see this being like a really like uplifting and powerful sounding song to play in a situation like that. So. But don't associate it with funerals when you hear it. Associate it with the summer vibes that we've been talking about, and the summer nostalgia and all the bittersweet feelings and the things that we're constantly trying to capture and that we're chasing that we never quite reach, all encapsulated in this album and in this song. Now, is this album something revolutionary or groundbreaking or even highly original? No, probably not. But is it enjoyable? Yes, 100%. It's just pulsing with the sounds of retro summer. Is it the best retro wave summer album available that you can go out and listen to right now? You could make the argument. There are some others that would be fantastic choices, but this one is definitely up there. So do me a favor here. And I'm not getting anything out of this, believe me. The artist will never even see this video. But trust me as a facilitator of nostalgic feelings, or trust me as your friend. Next time that you're setting out in your car to go for a little road trip, or next time you're heading out to the back patio to cook out, or maybe you're going for a walk, or maybe you just want to put on something while you're cleaning your house during the weekend, it would be perfect for that. Put this album on and let me know what you think. Now, I have put links in the description to both the YouTube album and Spotify. So check it out, please. You will not regret it. And for a score, I'm going to give Yachtmaster by Ultraboss a 9.2 out of 10. And there we are. So I hope that you all enjoyed our little hangout here in the den today. And I hope that some of you will give this album a chance. do me a favor and just listen to it one time and let me know what you think. Let me know if you found at least one song on there that you really enjoyed. And if you did, consider subscribing. Maybe I earned a sub by recommending a really good album. I don't know. But also, don't forget to like this video, but only if you actually liked this video. But for now, and as always, relax, enjoy life, and be kind. We'll see you in the next one.